guys like first-person shooters? You guys like first-person shooters on the Wii? Well, I got the game for you. It's GoldenEye 007 on the Wii. Fuck! Shit! Not today. Not today. GoldenEye for the Nintendo Wii, developed by Eurocom. This game is a reimagining of the original game that was released in the year 1997. Of course, that game was an adaptation of the film GoldenEye, released in the year 1995. That game revolutionized console FPS games and of course popularized split-screen multiplayer, making it one of the most influential games ever created. So what do you get when the Bond license is in the hands of one of the greediest and slimiest companies on the planet and they aren't quite sure what to do with it? We'll just remake what was popular in the past, of course. It's actually a lot more complicated than that. You see, Fils-Aime, the president of Nintendo of America at the time, wanted to try and get GoldenEye back on the Wii Virtual Console, but never truly realized that it would spark a huge rights war if that were the case. The original game was developed by Rare, who had a fantastic relationship with Nintendo, developing games for the Donkey Kong series, making Banjo-Kazooie, and even Conker's Bad Fur Day for the Nintendo 64. But in 2002, Microsoft bought Rare outright, and all their IP along with it. Even though Rare doesn't own the rights to Bond, or even the game rights for that matter, it would have been a challenge to convince Microsoft to port the game over to Wii because they had their own plans to remake GoldenEye. This game wouldn't be a reimagining like how Eurocom's game would end up becoming, but it was going to be a full visual overhaul. Same gameplay and everything, only the game would support HD resolutions and sport some swanky new HD textures as well. But even that project never fully got off the ground. Not only was Microsoft in the way, but Nintendo also had to worry about Danjaq and Activision. Danjaq is the company responsible for the rights of everything James Bond, and Activision was the holder of the video game rights to James Bond at the time. So, as you can see, it would have been a complete clusterfuck to try and get GoldenEye on the Wii. So, a plan to make a new GoldenEye game went into full production. GoldenEye 007 for the Nintendo Wii was revealed in the year 2010 at Nintendo's E3 press conference. The game was promised to release in November of that year, and lo and behold, it did. No delays or anything. Pretty impressive if you ask me. This iteration of GoldenEye had a lot going for it. It stars Daniel Craig, Judi Dench, and Rory Kinnear from the current series of films in their respective roles. All of the characters specific to GoldenEye were completely recast. 006, Natalia, Orumov, Zinnia, and even Zukovsky had been recast with new actors. And I gotta say, these guys are pretty unmemorable. It's nothing against these actors, it's just really hard to fill in the boots of that original movie. Those actors brought a lot of heart and soul to their respective characters. In the new game, it just feels like they're trying their best to emulate what the original actors did, but it just doesn't really work. Even the actors brought in from the film series like Craig and Dench don't really get to stretch their acting muscles as much. Since most of the game is gameplay, they don't really have as much to do as the other actors. But even the other actors don't have a whole lot to do. It's honestly pretty disappointing. The story itself has been changed to fit the time setting, and the sequence of events have been jumbled around for some weird reason. For example, in the original movie, Bond finds 006 again in the Memorial Park and meets Natalia after his encounter with 006. Then they both end up in the train yard after the tank scene, all the while 006, Orumov, and Zinnia are there as well. In the new game, Bond meets Natalia in Severnaya, which is not too different from the Nintendo 64 game since there was a level set in Severnaya. As a side note, Bond was never in Severnaya in the original movie, so both games are inaccurate in this detail. After Bond meets Natalia in Severnaya, they get taken to St. Petersburg for their interrogation by Michigan. This doesn't happen until after Bond finds 006 again. Then the tank scene happens and Bond ends up in the train yard, but 006 is nowhere to be seen. After all of that, it is when we're finally reintroduced to 006. It's not that it makes the game bad, but a lot of the emotional impact that scene in the Memorial Park originally had is stripped away when you put that scene later in the game. Not only that, but all of the scenes that made 006 memorable are just completely cut from this game. Overall, the story and characters feel like they just had the heart and soul sucked out of them. I understood what they were trying to do with that aspect of the game, but it just doesn't really stick the landing. Well, enough about the story. It's time to talk about the gameplay, and well, it is a game. I was gonna say it's just Call of Duty with James Bond in it, but there's two things. One, I already said that in my last video, and two, I'd like to go into further detail as to why I said that. The gameplay itself is average at best. This game never reaches the heights of what the original GoldenEye ended up accomplishing, and that was making you really feel like you were Bond. You had all of these gadgets at your disposal and a whole arsenal of weapons to take out bad guys with. You really did have a wide variety of options to tackle any objective. You were never restricted when playing a mission, the level was completely open to you. You could also decide decide what order to complete objectives. In this game, you have to do everything it tells you in a very specific order. It's excruciatingly linear in its level design. There aren't that many interesting options to pick through when it comes to navigating the levels or finding different points of interest. The most interesting it gets is finding a vantage point for sniping, and that's really it. At no point is there an objective that requires you to use a neat gadget. Let's talk about that part actually. The only gadget in the game is Bond's phone. What a fucking waste. The fact that Bond has no cool gadgets to use in this game is a crying shame. Even though Craig's Bond films are the most grounded in terms of tone and believability, he's no stranger to having his own gadgets. Even though they were appropriate for his version, it wouldn't hurt my feelings if they put laser watches or exploding pens in this game. I guess it must have cut back on some development time or something. Either way, it's definitely a huge negative for me. The shooting itself isn't terrible. Sometimes I aim for someone's head and it just doesn't register it as a headshot for some reason. Sometimes the hit detection can feel pretty wonky, which is a shame, but luckily it doesn't happen super often. The levels in terms of variety are actually not bad at all. This is something I think they actually nailed pretty well. One level you'll be in a nightclub, next level you'll be in the jungles of Nigeria. I never really got bored of what I was actually looking at, which is ultimately a good thing in my book. Looking forward to what level would be next helped me get through the painfully average gameplay. That's really my biggest problem with the game, is that they never went further than, let's put a bunch of bad guys in front of the player to shoot. That stuff can be fun of course, but I just wish for a lot more variety when it came to how the game played. The way the game looks isn't half bad either, especially for a game that was designed exclusively for the Wii. It's pretty impressive some of the stuff they were able to do with it, mainly having to do with the character models. Everybody looks good, and even the facial animations are quite good for something that was released on the Wii. So what about the multiplayer? That's the biggest thing the original GoldenEye was popular for. Split screen? Don't worry, we got you covered. Online? Well... Yeah, the servers got shut down in 2018. I remember having a lot of fun with it when I was younger, since it was basically the only online shooter I could play that wasn't Call of Duty. Thinking about it now, it suffers from the same problems I have with the single player campaign. It's just Call of Duty. Now split screen is pretty much the same thing, but the big difference now is that you have your friends right next to you, not to mention you have a good number of options to make the game more fun. Rubber grenades, knick-knack mode, paintball mode, that's the shit I love to see. Along with the custom options, you have a metric fuck ton of characters to choose from. From Jaws and Oddjob all the way to Red Grant and Baron Samedi, it's a wild roster of characters. It's kind of cool they were able to put a bunch of these characters in the split screen mode. And you know what? It saves the game from being a complete disappointment. The only thing I wish the split screen offered was the option to find weapons on the maps instead of loadouts, but other than that, it's a pretty good time with friends. One thing I forgot to mention is the score. It was composed by David Arnold, who did the score for past Bond films like Tomorrow Never Dies and Casino Royale. So it's pretty easy for me to say it's a good score and one of the better aspects of the game for me. On the whole, GoldenEye 007 for the Wii could have been way more. It suffers from a lack of gameplay variety and extremely linear level design. The way they translated the original movie to the modern day could have really worked, but the rewritten narrative is stripped of a lot of the moments that made the original movie great. The split-screen multiplayer is the saving grace of this package, providing a fun and replayable multiplayer mode that is infinitely fun with friends. If you're looking for a James Bond game that feels a lot more accurate to the original GoldenEye experience, play 007 Nightfire. It's easily the best Bond game I've ever played and blows this game out of the water. It's a shame that this game never got to grow into something much bigger. It could have been the return of an all-time classic shooter and maybe even surpass the original. Maybe if it had more time in the oven, it could have been exactly that. But we'll never really know for sure. For now, this game is at the very least an interesting part of the Wii's library and the history of James Bond video games. Nobody ever really thought that GoldenEye would return, if only it had returned in a way that felt more like the original. At least you can use Oddjob's hat in this game.
See reflections on the water.